News, play breakdowns, power rankings, storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gun. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. S here, Lauren joining me as always. And yes, if you are listening on a Tuesday morning or afternoon, which means we have a guest, ladies and gentlemen. Today, it is Portland Trailblazers talk. All Portland Trailblazers conversation. No more Damian Lillard. Scoot Henderson is in the building. No, we don't have Scoot Henderson. But just as good as Scoot Henderson, Sean Highkin, who obviously, if you don't already, you should subscribe to the Rose Garden Report newsletter. I am subscribed because I was all over the Damian Lillard sweepstakes this summer. But yes, of course, a cover of the Portland Trailblazers as well. Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Of course. Yeah. Obviously, we sort of do this every week with a beat writer, beat reporter, just kind of covering what team we have. And this week, it's the Portland Trailblazers. Overall, I guess, I think just to open things up, what would you say is the vibes of the organization right now? They're standing at 6-19. They're frisky in some games. They've got a lot of young, interesting pieces, some older pieces that may be available in trade. We'll get into that later. But yeah, just overall, how are the vibes around the organization?
Good for what their record is, I would say.
Okay.
Like if you look around at some of the other teams that are kind of in their position record-wise, or like teams that came into the other teams that you kind of came into the season knowing we're going to be in the lottery. Like,
yeah,
when you look at what's going on in Detroit now, where they literally haven't won a game in 6 weeks,
not even comparable. Right.
Or you look at what's going on in Washington, where they're like not like barely an NBA team, or even like San Antonio, as much as like, yeah, they have Wemby, so long term they're going to be fine probably, but like that's also like they just had an 18-game losing streak. I think organizationally, obviously, like the guys and Chauncey are not happy about, they've lost 7 games in a row. And a lot of the games that they've lost are games where you look at them and say they easily could have won those games. But organizationally, from people I've talked to, I think everybody is happy with where things are at in terms of the development of the guys whose development are important and, some of the strides that guys are making and just kind of overall where everything is at. There's nothing that anybody is really looking at and saying, "Oh, this is a disaster. We have to do something about this." I think everybody kind of came into this once the Dame trade happened. I think everybody kind of came into the season knowing what it was going to be and knowing that their record was going to be what their record was going to be, and what they were looking at was, are guys getting better? Are guys buying in? Are you seeing tangible progress? And I think if you talk to people in the organization so far, the answer to that would be yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. So you brought up Chauncey Billups, and I feel like I have to start there with my first question. Where are you at with long term? Like, how do you feel about Chauncey? How do you feel the guys like react to Chauncey? I've seen some clips on Twitter of maybe some not so great things with Deandre Ayton. Is there anything to that, or is Chauncey Billups? Are you confident that Chauncey Billups is with this group for the foreseeable future?
I have not heard anything that would suggest that they're going to make any kind of a change anytime soon. He has another year left on his... Well, so he signed a 5-year deal. I believe the 5th year is a team option, so he has at least one hard year left on the deal. I haven't heard anything in the short term that would suggest that he isn't seeing the end of that deal. As of right now, they're happy with it. And honestly, like, this year, I mean, we've talked about it, and I'm sure we're going to get into some of this more, but like, they've been in a lot of these games. Guys are playing hard. Guys are buying in. He has a way. I mean, the DeAndre Ayton stuff, I would imagine we'll probably get into. I don't think that's a him and Chauncey situation as much as I think that's just kind of they're still figuring each other out. But to answer your question, I think they like, and I think a big part of this also is that the last 2 years, so this is his 3rd year on the job. The first 2 years, not only was there just so much organizational chaos, like his first year, Neil Olshey, the general manager, gets fired in December,
Right.
and then they shut Dame down for the ab surgery and trade everybody at the deadline, and then there's all this chaos going on, and really the last 2 years he hasn't had a roster that because his whole thing is like, I'm a defensive minded coach, I'm a I have a certain way that I want to play, and until this year he hasn't had the personnel to be able to do that this year. And I wrote this on media day that basically he's kind of the face now that Dame's gone. Chauncey Billups is kind of the face of the franchise, for better or worse. And as far as like what the roster looks like, there's only one player left on the team. There's been so much turnover over the last couple of years. There's only one player left on the team that A, was ever drafted by Neil Olshey, or B, ever played for Terry Stotts, and that's Anthony Simons. Everybody else was handpicked by this front office for this coach. And so essentially what I wrote on media day at the start of camp was, now that he has the guys that he wants, or the types of players that he likes, and if this doesn't work, if they don't see the kind of progress that they need to see, then it's on him. And to his credit, so far, I think you're seeing guys buy in, you're seeing guys respond well to him, you're seeing you're not I haven't felt like, oh, he's lost the locker room, or guys aren't listening to him, or guys aren't like, do I think he's like the greatest coach in the history of basketball? No. But do I think he's actively bad or actively holding anything back at this point? I would say also no.
Right. It's funny you say that, because the turmoil, right? The fact that he has survived all of that kind of gives you a sense of how much, one, they trust him to kind of lead whatever group this is in the next couple of years, and two, yeah, he's made it this far. And I think part of that you mentioned. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think a part of it is also just that, I mean, there was a little bit of a power vacuum that kind of opened up when Neil Olshey got fired, and somebody kind of had to step into it. So yeah, I think that's part of it. But also I don't know if either of you have ever dealt with Chauncey. Like, have either of you ever met him or talked to him?
Not yet, actually, not yet. Hopefully this year. Yeah.
He's very easy to talk to, and he has a way of drawing people in and kind of meeting people. Like the interpersonal stuff with him is I've really enjoyed on a personal level talking to him and getting to know him. And he has a certain, maybe because of the way his playing career and what his reputation was as a player, he has a way of speaking that people listen to and people respect. And and he's been very honestly, I found him to be very, over the last couple of years when they were losing when they were supposed to be winning, unlike this year. That's kind of the other difference between this year is, like I said earlier, everybody came into the season knowing exactly what this was going to be as far as wins and losses. Whereas the last couple of years when they still had Dame, people came into the season expecting that it was going to be a playoff team, and that and then when it didn't go that way, there was a lot more of hey, what's going on here? But I think that he just, I don't know, he has a way of talking and a way of explaining stuff, and also just a way of during the last couple of years when he's been kind of figuring out how to be a head coach for the first time, I've found him to be very, almost to a fault and almost to a point where it hurt him at times, very honest and introspective about this is on me, this is something I'm still learning. And I think that's something that a lot of people I think respect. Now, again, am I saying that he's the greatest coach of all time? No, I'm not. But I think the organization right now is comfortable with where things are at. Now, could that change if something disastrous happens, or if they go on a 20-game losing streak? It could, but as of right now, I think the people whose opinions matter about this stuff are happy with where things are, and where everybody else wants to land on that, I don't know, but the important stakeholders are happy with the coaching situation right now.
Right. I know you mentioned, the defense and the fact that Chauncey, he kind of prides himself on being a defensive minded coach. That's sort of been what's been so surprising this year. I believe they're now 19th on defense. Yeah, 19th in defensive rating. And I think I'm kind of just interested from your perspective, how are they succeeding on that end And I mean, how much of it is Toumani Camara? Because that's all I've seen on my end. It's like Toumani has just been amazing as this point of attack perimeter defender for you guys. I know that's not all of it, but how are they succeeding on that end defensively?
Well, Toumani Camara is part of it. I think a full year of Matisse Thybulle is part of it. I don't know how much you've watched Matisse Thybulle, but that he is absolutely just he's so annoying. I say that in like the nicest way possible. He's just one of the he's one of the most annoying guys for other teams to play against. He's like it was funny. He had this play last night where he almost like he intercepted a pass like behind his back. Like it's like he has like a way of getting steals that I have like never seen anybody get before.
It's the volleyball player, man. It's the volleyball player.
He's just it's insane. Now I'm looking at Cleaning the Glass right now, and yeah, they're 20th in the league in defense. Which when you consider, I mean, that's not great, but like when you consider they were bottom 5 in the league each of the last 4 years. That's still a pretty considerable improvement. And part of it, I think, is the personnel. And like, yeah, Toumani Camara has been great on that end, like you mentioned. Deandre Ayton has been, I think, mostly pretty good on that end. It's Jeremy Grant's a solid defender. I think the fact that like now they have the personnel as opposed to the last several years. Honestly, even Scoot, who I'm sure we're gonna get to, like he still fouls too much because he's a rookie, but he competes on that end. He's not, for all the criticisms that there were of Damian Lillard as a defender, Scoot, I think, is, athletically more, able and, capable of doing something on that end. And, he's kind of still learning how to do that effectively. But I think the personnel is just more suited to being a good defensive team than I think the last couple of years have been.
Yeah, he's fighting over screens more consistently. That's the thing I've seen with Scoot is like he's not going to give up on a play or like die on a screen. He's going to try to like whatever it kind of requires from that possession defensively. Sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I think their backcourt is so fascinating to me. I want to touch on another angle of their backcourt in Shaedon Sharpe. He's taken steps forward as a playmaker, as a scorer this year. Kind of a few maybe part question here, but how much do you attribute that to him individually, the scheme as a whole, the fact that they've got 3 really intriguing guards, and what do you think his steps forward are?
Well, you're kind of seeing just as the people that they have available change, you see his role also kind of starting to evolve. Because like the first month of the season, you're like, oh my God, he's making a leap. He's going to be a future all-star. And then there was that couple of weeks where him and Malcolm Brogdon, or where Scoot and Brogdon and Anthony Simons were all out. And basically their only playable point guard was Skylar Mays, who, he's
he was pretty good.
He's fine as like a break glass in case of emergency point guard. But like if he needs to be playing 35 minutes a game those couple of weeks were a pretty rough watch. But when you have Shaden out there, like there was that couple week stretch where he was leading the league in minutes played and he was having to do a whole lot. And that was when he struggled. And then shockingly, once Scoot and Brogdon came back from their injuries, Shaden started looking a lot more comfortable. And now like the last couple of games, Anthony Simons has been back. And now it's been a big adjustment of like now Shaden's having to fit into a kind of another new role, playing with a new guy that he hasn't played with in that way in a whole lot of situations. And so like the last couple of games he's struggled a little bit shooting, but I mean it's been a little bit up and down with him, but I think they very much view him as a guy. He's one of him and Scoot I think are the 2 core guys I think that they're looking at.
I think it's funny when you talk about Sharpe. By the way, fellow Canadian here, so I'm always gonna stand and But the interesting thing about guards and throwing them into adverse situations is how they're able to adapt and kind of work through the kinks of their own game. Sharpe through last year, through this year, has kind of been thrown in, like you said, in a bunch of different roles, being asked to play a bunch of different ways. And I think that sort of helps a guy like him figure out what he's going to be eventually long-term. The playmaking, I think, is an area that still has to grow, but he's shown a little bit more poise at getting downhill. Like there was that offensive foul last night late in the game, but for the most part, Yeah, he's making better decisions when he's going downhill. And I think that's important overall to his game. I guess, you mentioned it towards the end between, Anthony, Scoot, and Shaden, but like, what is the feasibility of that as a core long term for you? That trio of guards, if you will.
I think size-wise, just because all three of them aren't 6'3", like it's a little bit more viable than some of the other stuff that they've tried over the years with other guys. I think Shaden has more of the type of size where he could move to the 3 in some lineups. I don't think they see him there.
He was playing 3 last night, right? Next to Brogdon and Simons. Yeah.
Oh yeah, in some lineups, and that's something they're also figuring out, because that's also, and I think physically Shaden has the ability to be a good defender. It's just, he's a young guy. He's still kind of figuring out how to be consistent on that end, but he competes on that end. He has the frame for it. It's just a matter of filling all of that out. But I think this year he's, at least offensively, last year, you'd see the crazy dunks and you'd see the highlights, and that's kind of what you would see from him, but this year, I think he's become a lot more efficient. He started taking better shots. He started, as you said, the playmaking, I think, has made some steps. It's still not all the way there, but I think there's progress being made there. I think he's going a long way towards eventually being a very, very good player.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I hope he's a part of Team Canada's roster this summer. I don't know if he's commented. Yeah,
he asked him at media day. He said he wants to. I don't know whether that's going to happen, because I think, and you would know more about this than I would, but I think they like to have guys that are like already in the program and in the system. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't been.
It's just like it's like a numbers game too. There's 12 roster spots, and it starts to get tough to kind of sort out those final spots.
Yeah, well, I don't know the inner workings of the Canadian national basketball program, but he has said on the record that he wants to play for Team Canada. So
I think long term he is. Yeah. I think long term he will be, but I don't know about this.
He said he wants to, so whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
So kind of looking at another key piece of this core and this post Damian Lillard era is Deandre Ayton, averaging 12 and 10 this year. But there are moments that maybe don't look so great on both ends. What is kind of the read within the organization on DA? And you kind of mentioned, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but also like, where's the long-term fit, even with Rob Williams and Jeremy Grant still there? What is the overall picture on DA and what to expect from him long-term as being the franchise center?
Everybody's still kind of feeling out the Deandre Ayton thing, and it's definitely been, there have been like in the Mavericks game the other night, he gets subbed out, and he's like, he like slams the cushion on the seat as he's like going back to the bench, and it's like there are times where like he's getting frustrated, or like the coaching staff is getting frustrated with him. But I think overall, and everybody's still kind of feeling it out, but I think overall it's been more positive than negative. Right. And especially when you consider a lot of the stuff that you kind of heard about him coming out of Phoenix and the way that ended, that whole thing didn't work out. And by the way, whatever's going on with Jaden Ivey in Detroit is starting to make me wonder if maybe whatever happened between DA and Monty was maybe more because of one guy than the other. That's a fair point. That's just a thought that I've had, but honestly, like Deandre Ayton, like he's had the lowest usage of his career so far, and so if anybody would have a reason to just be totally checked out and be frustrated and not buy into what's going on, it would be him. But so far, the body language has been good. You've never been out there and been like, oh, he's not playing hard, he's mailing it in. He's engaged. Like, he doesn't always make the right decisions, but he's never just out there just, not trying or quitting or any of the stuff that was maybe talked about in Phoenix. Like, his attitude's been good. He's said all the right things about understanding what everything is. Chauncey has talked about, like, I need to be better about making sure he gets more looks. We need to integrate him more. So it's really just kind of a feeling out process. And I think there's a whole lot of like, they want to make things easy for him because of, they feel like maybe he got a little bit of a raw deal organizationally in Phoenix. but then I think he also
Mm-hmm.
like has on the one hand, like I think he's happy to just be anywhere else besides Phoenix, and so he's trying to make it work. But also,
Right.
like I do think he would like it if they involved him more in the offense, and I think they want to also. But it's just again, they're getting so many guys back for the first time. Like
Right.
the game, I mean, Rob Williams obviously is out for the season now, but like the last two games, the Dallas game and the Golden State game, when we're recording this, have been the first two games since opening night that they've had all of their guys healthy. So it's really still a matter
Right.
of like him and Anthony Simons have now only played 3 games together, for example. Like it's just there's still it's gonna be a long time. And I think there's this idea, and there certainly was among like fans that I've seen on Twitter, or readers and subscribers or whatever that I've heard from, that like, oh, once they get all their guys back, it's just going to be smooth sailing. And it's like, well, no, I mean, we're 2 months into the season, but most of these guys haven't played together since training camp because guys have been in and out and they've been hurt. So now it's going to be a whole nother process of like feeling out. But I would say overall, the DeAndre Ayton experiment hasn't been perfect, but I think it's been more positive than negative so far.
I think part of involving DA more, and you mentioned it, is obviously having Simons more healthy, and obviously just being in the lineup, getting that pick and roll connection with him more. I think Brogdon has been pretty good in involving DA more, kind of getting him going in the short roll area. At least I know from the Raptors game earlier this month, Brogdon and DA just absolutely carved up the Raptors. And then I think, another part of that is Scoot Henderson and how Scoot is going to be kind of working alongside DA. He's obviously a massive part of this rebuild in general. And while he did get off to a slow start, we sort of talked about it off air, but last 2 weeks have been really, really good. 17 points, 5 assists. He's knocking down a couple of threes a game. I sort of joked with you off air asking if it was about the goggles, but just in general, like what have you seen from him over the last couple of weeks that I guess has looked better and getting him in rhythm?
Well, last night against the Warriors, I don't think it's his best. Statistically, his best game was the other night against Utah, but most of that was in garbage time. So there's only so much you're really drawing from that. Last night, I think, was his best game from start to finish of his career. And that's because both of his shifts, usually, I mean, he stayed in kind of at the end last night because he was playing well, but usually, he'll play a shift in the first half and then he'll play a shift in the second half and they'll close with the starters. But I think coming off the bench has been good for him. I don't think that's obviously a permanent thing because like they didn't draft him number 3 overall to not start long term. But I think for the foreseeable future, maybe even for the rest of this season, he's probably going to be coming off the bench. And I think that's probably going to be good for him because, they threw him out there as a starter at the beginning of the season before the ankle injury, and that did not go well. He was clearly not ready for it. But you're starting to see him make better decisions. You're starting to see, like I said earlier when we were talking about the defense, he's starting, like he only had 2 fouls last night. And I think that's maybe the most encouraging thing out of all of it is that like he's starting to learn how to pick his spots as far as like going for steals because, as a rookie, you're going to get called for some of that stuff that maybe you're not going to get called when you have a few years in the league and you get a little bit more of a friendly whistle. So he's still feeling out a lot of that stuff. And I think the real big thing over the last few games has been that he started really trying to get downhill more and trying to get to the basket more. You're now starting to see, and Chauncey told us the other night that he had a conversation with Scoot where he said, look, you are this incredible athlete. I don't know if I've seen you dunk this season. Like, you don't look athletic. And Scoot was like, well, wait a minute, that's not what I am. But he's right. But he's right. Like he was like, no, he was right. And so now he's made more of a concerted effort. And I think a lot of this is like, a lot of his rookie stuff, a lot of it is confidence, a lot of it is, especially because, his first 5 games of the season really couldn't have gone much worse than they did before the ankle injury. And so it's like, I think he's starting to figure stuff out. I think the organization is happy with the progress that he's made. He's not all the way there yet. He's going to have some like the Dallas game the other night, I think was a big example. He was awful in the first half and then he was really good in the second half. So it's like it's still a matter of kind of figuring all that out, but I think long term he's going to be fine. Mentality wise and he's what he says and just kind of the way he approaches stuff and you hear behind the scenes like he puts in the work. He knows what he needs to get better at. I think long term he's going to be fine.
Yeah,
I think so too. And man, like you have to give guards at least 2 or 3 years, especially lead guards, like a guy
especially
who's supposed to take
19-year-old
on the
lead
helmet.
guards. Like
He's a
kid. That's the
not
thing.
every
Like our buddy, do you know
how
Danny
old was Dame? How old was
Dame?
Dame
Was 22.
Yes,
Dame was
I
a
do know
4-year
Dame,
college guy. I mean, he was
right.
awesome he was great right away as a rookie, but he was 4 years older than Scoot, and he was the best scorer in the country in college. Like he's it's a little bit of a different thing. Like you look at some of these guys, like you look at like De'Aaron Fox was awful his rookie year. So was Darius Garland. Those were like among the worst players in the league their rookie seasons. De'Aaron Fox was so bad his rookie year that in his second year, he was one of the top 3 vote getters for most improved player, which never happens. So, I can only think of like a couple of guys who came into the league that young, like Derrick Rose comes to mind his rookie year, or like Kyrie Irving. Like there's only a couple of guys, LaMelo was one, that play that position and are that young when they come into the league and are good right away. So I think, and I get it because, he was drafted 3rd overall. He had this hype coming out of the G League for 2 years. He was quote unquote the heir apparent to Dame. So there were these expectations that were placed on him right away. But when you just look at A, the position he plays, and B, just how physically, challenging it is to adjust from one level to the next level at that age, like it was never going to happen right away. But I think you're seeing tangible progress. If you look at where he is now versus where he was at the beginning of the season, and then you kind of extrapolate that out to where's he going to be around the All-Star break, and then where's he going to be by the end of the season, I think he's on an okay trajectory as far as development.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love Scoot. I'm so high on him, and I think that even just like the way he carries himself, he feels like such a true pro, even being. He
has the juice. Whatever the juice is like star, like as far as like star quality, all that stuff. He's also. I think the thing that I love the most about Scoot, and this is this is just social media stuff, so it's whatever, but he posts highlights on his Instagram story all the time. Like he's one of those guys where like when you open up his IG story, he always has like the little dots because he posts a ton. He posts highlights all the time. He never posts his own highlights. He always is like posting his teammates and his friends.
Oh, wow.
Like he's posted like over the summer, Matisse Thybulle and Duop Reith, who's one of their centers on a 2-way contract, were playing for the Australian national team, and he was like posting their FIBA highlights, or like he was posting like Dyson Daniels' highlights because they played together on the G League Ignite. Like he's always like posting. Yeah. He's always like posting. He's not like, and as much like, not that there's anything wrong with posting your own highlights, but the fact that he's always posted, like he was posting like Shaedon Sharpe's like the other night when he crossed over. Who was it on the it was somebody on the Clippers. It was Tice. That crossover move that Sharpe had.
Oh, right.
He was like posting that with like the head exploding emojis as opposed to like his own stuff. Like that's the kind of that's just the kind of little, like, I don't know how much that matters in the grand scheme of things, but that's just like Scoot is more about hyping other guys on the team up than he is about like the look at me stuff that you would kind of expect from somebody who's had as much hype as he has.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff, personally, I think that stuff is hugely important because it's the type of thing that it almost reminds me of when Tyrese came into the league, and when he was so young, it was like you can see that he's really a true pro and has like is just in love with the work and like truly becoming great. And so having the guys, that are really just locked into seemingly all the right things is something that's like invaluable in my opinion. But I want to ask you, kind of switch gears a little bit here, and I want to ask about Malcolm Brogdon and his presence and kind of his just overall, not just demeanor, but how he leads some of the young guys with his veteran presence. What are your thoughts on, and what have you seen and heard about how he has impacted just these young guys adjusting to the pace and learning the game and kind of evolving even so early on in their careers?
I think it's been hugely important and beneficial for them to have Malcolm Brogdon, and honestly, that's part of why they brought him in. I think they kind of realized that even though they're going young and they're rebuilding, you don't want to have your whole team be kids and not have any veterans on the team.
Ask the Detroit Pistons that. Yeah.
A, the Detroit Pistons. B, I mean, you saw what happened last year in Houston. It was a disaster. And then this year they go out and throw all that money at Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks because they're just like, oh, we need some adults. And so I think especially at the point guard position, having somebody like Brogdon who, once when Simons got hurt, they were throwing Scoot and Shaden out there together. That didn't go well. And then when Scoot got hurt, they put Brogdon in there, and there's a level of competence that's there on the floor when he's out there that you can't count on night to night when it's some of the younger guys with no safety net, which you kind of expect. And I think they understand the importance of having a guy like Malcolm Brogdon. And I mean, to his credit, he came from, he won Sixth Man of the Year last year, and he was on a Celtics team that almost made the finals. And, he came in, and rather than just being like, oh, I don't want to be here, he right away came in and said, look, I know why they brought me here. I think Scoot is a special talent. It's important to me to shepherd him along and help him get adjusted to the NBA. And even, when at the start of the season, Brogdon wasn't starting, and when we asked him about how it felt to him, to be coming off the bench behind a rookie, he was like, look, they view Scoot as the face of the franchise in the future. I think it's important for him to get those reps and to start. He's another guy who's said all the right things and has been doing all the right things. And I know that he's a guy that guys, go to and look up to. And he's also very helpful to Chauncey. Yeah. Chauncey has talked about this before, where he's like, I'm a former player. I'm a point guard. I can give guys certain advice about stuff, but it comes different from a teammate who is actually out there playing with you, who can why do you think Udonis Haslem stuck around with the Heat long past when he was a viable NBA player? Because even if he was an assistant coach, but just doing the exact same stuff, it's still a little bit of a different power dynamic when it's a coach versus a guy who's on the team who's also a player. Guys,
Absolutely.
Are going to take guys more seriously when they're also a player. And so and as much as I think there's a chance, I'm sure we'll get to trade stuff, but I think there's a chance that Malcolm is moved either before the deadline or the summer, because that's the business of the league. But they have really liked having him around.
Yeah, I think, I would love to transition into trade stuff right now, but I do have a final question before we get into that.
Okay.
The Blazers, they have, they've kind of made some interesting fringe pieces become, or at least seem like legit NBA guys. Duop Reith, you mentioned. Jabari Walker, I think is another guy where it's whoa, these guys. Oh, sorry. Look,
start the question.
I guess I'll repeat it here, but okay. Blazers have had, I think they've done a good job this year of finding these fringe guys and turning them into NBA pieces. I think guys who legitimately could play in NBA rotations. You mentioned Duop Reith earlier. There's obviously Jabari Walker as well. I'm wondering how much of that has been since Mike Schmitz joined the team, and how much better do you think the Blazers have been since Mike Schmitz has joined the team in terms of talent and prospect evaluation?
Well, let me tell you this, and this is something that Joe Cronin said in his, I don't think he meant to reveal this, but he said this in his exit interview after his end of season press conference after his first season, when he took over halfway through the season. But under the previous general manager, Neil Olshey, the Blazers as an organization had one international scout.
Wow.
So...
And I'm assuming that's changed very much.
Yeah, no, they've gone. It isn't just Schmitz. Obviously, Mike Schmitz is somebody that I know he was one of the few people who had actually seen Shaedon Sharpe play in some of those high school games, and so he was one of the guys early on, right after he took the job, was one of the ones that was pushing to hey, this is the kid we need to draft. This kid has the most upside, but he also just. I don't know. He's certainly somebody that if there's anybody who knows every single player at every single one of these things and has known them and had relationships with them since they were 12 or whatever, and he's scouting all of these, under 18, NBA Africa camps or whatever. That's certainly a guy. But yeah, they have really ever since the front office change that took place when Neil Olshey was fired, they have pretty much revamped the entire organization on that end. And the other part of it, and this is a pretty basic thing, but it's something that the previous regime was actually actively against, but that now they have started doing, is they, for the first time this year, they have a G League team, which is
right. Yeah.
been very, it's been very useful because one of their rookies, one of their second round pick this year, Rayon Rupert, who's a French kid who played for the New Zealand Breakers last year. he's not ready to play in the NBA, but they really like him. And he's been playing 30 minutes a night in the G League. And you've seen him get a lot better and get a lot more comfortable playing in the G League. And then even some of the guys that have, like Duop Reith, who we talked about, he played in their first ever game with the Rip City remix. And he had like 37 and 10. And then the next night he was the Blazers backup center. And now he's in the rotation. And then like, Chris Murray, who was their other first round pick, he was the 23rd pick, Keegan Murray's brother, hasn't really been in the rotation. Early on when Chauncey put him in, he looked like he didn't really know what he was doing, but he's another guy who, since he's not playing for the Blazers, he's been playing in the G League. And then since he started playing in the G League, when Chauncey has had to put him in, he's looked a lot more comfortable. So I think part of it is, yes, certainly the people that they brought in on the front office side, like Schmitz, who you mentioned, there are others too who have been instrumental in this as well, but also just doing basic stuff that the previous front office regime didn't do, like have a G League team and use it, has been, I think, a big part of it also.
Yeah. No, that's a good point you bring up, Sean, in terms of the G League team. And also, I love the name Remix. That's a really cool
They just
name,
have destroyed the branding and I've had so many people, like yesterday, Bill Walton posted a picture of himself wearing a Rip City remix.
I saw that.
They have like a version of it that's like a psychedelic thing, so it's obviously like totally on brand for Bill Walton to wear. And like I retweeted it, and then I had friends I had one. I'm not gonna just like say his name and blow up his spot, but I have one major national NBA media figure text me and being like, "Can you get me that remix shirt? I need that." like that stuff. And the other thing, like I've been going to their games pretty often, both because as a reporter it gives me something to do when the team is on the road, and like it gets me like more of a chance to look at some of their young guys, or their they get to know some of like their assistant front office people or coaching staff, some of the lower level people in the organization who are always at those games. So it's been useful to me, but it's also just been like a fun vibe, and they've leaned hard. I guess every city and every market that has the G League does it a little differently. Some teams play at like just high school gyms and like don't make it into like a big public thing at all. The Blazers have leaned all the way into like this being like a family friendly entertainment. Like kids tickets are $5. You can bring your own food in, or like all of this stuff. They've tried to make it into like
that's
family,
amazing.
or fans, like the players will like hang around and take pictures with fans after the games and stuff. Like they've made, from a business side, the organization has made it into like this family friendly community thing, but also just from a basketball side, like it's been very beneficial to them already. They've had less than half a season of the G League, and you're already seeing what the benefits are for the organization and for their development.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, Lauren, it is your favorite time of the year, the favorite time of the week, and that is trade scenarios. The Blazers are going to be obviously active when it comes to some of the guys that we've already talked about. But in general, I guess we can get started. Lauren, go for it. Do you think?
Yeah. So I guess I kind of want to start with some questions, because there's so many directions that Portland could potentially go in terms of who they look to move. You mentioned Malcolm Brogdon earlier, but also like, I'm curious, how crazy are they willing to get? Like, is there a chance that they move Jeremy Grant now? Is there a chance that even Ayton becomes available? It sounds like, based on our conversation, the answer is no there, but I want to kind of get your opinion on who, even someone like Matisse, like who all is truly available, and what areas in terms of, obviously they're in a stage of roster development, but in terms of bringing guys back, what position, what prototype do you think that they'd be looking for?
So I am unlike you. This is my least favorite time of year. Maybe it's just because I spent the whole summer dealing with the Dame stuff. They don't want the whole, they don't want the entire, they don't want to just sell off there's this idea, and I feel like as a, NBA media, we've all kind of done a bad job of the way we talk about this stuff, where like it's this binary thing where any team that's rebuilding, hey, they have a player who's good, who's over the age of 25, they need to just trade him and get more draft picks. And it's like, it's not always like, I just talked about how important Malcolm Brogdon has been to have around for Scoot. Do I think it's possible that they move him before the deadline if they get an offer that they like? Certainly, but he has a year left. Like I think like going into last year's deadline, everybody knew that they were going to trade
Mm-hmm.
Josh Hart because he was coming up on free agency. They
Right.
weren't going to re-sign him for the money that he wanted. So they had to trade him before they lost it for nothing. Brogdon has a year left on his deal. So I feel like unless he gets
Right.
injured, which I mean, with him, it's a possibility. Because he has an injury history, so he could get hurt. But any deal I think that's there for him at the deadline is probably still going to be there this summer. So they could go either direction on that one. I actually think the guy to keep Jeremy Grant, I really don't think is going to be that much. Not that he's untouchable, because I think Scoot and Shaden are the only real, truly like untouchable guys. But I get it. Like, I've seen all the national podcasts and all the national columns and whatever are talking about like doing their lists of like the top trade candidates for contenders, and Jeremy Grant's name always comes up on that list. But I really would be surprised if he's moved at the deadline. I think from an organization, like, they love him. Like, he's a great locker room guy. They also, like, he's happy. He wants to be in Portland. He likes the city and the organization. Like, and the other thing about him is, like, with Brogdon, you understand why there's a thought that they'd move him, because they have so many guards they're building around. Jeremy Grant isn't really blocking anybody as far as getting minutes.
Right.
Like, so
Right.
I think it's pretty unlikely that Jeremy Grant gets moved before the deadline. Brogdon, I could go either way on. I think I could see a scenario where they do. I could also see a scenario where they maybe wait until the summer on him. But
Interesting.
Matisse Thybulle is actually the most interesting one to me, because he is the type of guy, and don't get me wrong, they love him. They would be happy to keep him around, but he is the type of guy that is more valuable to good teams than he is to teams in Portland's position. And he's also on a mid-level basically mid-level deal, because he signed that 3-year, $33 million offer sheet with Dallas that they matched. So it's pretty reasonable money. So it's less money that a contending team would have to match. Like with Jeremy Grant, he's making like 26, 27 this year. So you're putting him on the Lakers or whatever, and it's like, oh, it's the D'Angelo Russell, and it's like, what the hell do the Blazers want D'Angelo Russell for? That doesn't fit with what they're like. That
exactly.
It's with Matisse Thybulle, it's less money to match. He doesn't have the injury history. He's younger. He, I think, is just a good 3-point shooter now. I think a lot of that was just
and he's that's what I was going to bring up. He's shooting the ball well, 39% on like 4 attempts a game. That's good.
We'll put it this way. He was actually a decent 3-point shooter his rookie season in Philadelphia. Not like great, but he was like 35% or something. Something respectable. And then from his second year on, he shot terribly and also didn't shoot. And then he gets to Portland.
Yeah, they barely let him shoot.
And suddenly he can shoot again and is willing to shoot again. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the mitigating factor there was between his second season. I don't know whether there was a coaching change that was made that maybe affected some things, but I don't know. But I think the point being that he's had over half a season's worth of games in Portland now between the end of last season and the start of this season. And he's shooting, I don't know what his updated percentage was, but when I looked a few days ago, it was over 40% on like 4 attempts per game. So it's like, okay, maybe this is just legit now. So that the point being, that's a guy, and that's also what he does defensively. That's the type of guy on the type of contract that contending teams are going to be interested in, and that they could get some real off.
So
I think that's somebody. If I had to rank as far as like their veterans, like who is most to least likely to get moved before the deadline, I would say probably Thybulle 1, Brogdon 2, Grant 3. I really don't think Grant's going to be moved before the deadline, or maybe even not in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm actually curious where you stand on Simons then, because like he's not necessarily a veteran. I don't think you could call him a veteran, but he is obviously a guard, and maybe not the guard that you're picking between Shaden, Scoot, and Simons. Do you think they would entertain offers on Anthony Simons at the deadline?
Not right now. Down the line,
no?
maybe.
Okay,
right now, no.
Fair.
He's their best player. Now that he's healthy, he's their best player. And he's Scoot, as we talked about, Scoot and Shaden are not ready for being like the full, you need to have somebody in the backcourt who is a scoring threat and is somebody that other teams double team and send guys at. Like,
right.
That's what, wherever you want to land on him at, long term or like what his ceiling is, that's what he is right now. And having somebody like that around is going to make things a lot easier for Scoot and Shaden. I think in like a year and a half, they'll have to make a decision about which of those guys they want to keep, but that's not something I think they're looking at right now. No.
Yeah, right. That's fair. I think what's so fascinating to me about Portland right now is that a lot of these guys, like even though the timing might not be right to trade them, guys like obviously Matisse, but also Simons and Jeremy Grant, I think that there are a lot of teams that could really, really use a guy like that and would find a way to put the right package together where the price would be high enough to maybe make it worth Portland's time to even hear. And so that's what interests me so much right now at this next trade deadline, because there aren't many teams that are big times that are could be big time sellers that also have really, really solid players that can be on a contender that present upside. Like those situations are few and far between, but it sounds like Portland is a lot more content with where they're at from in the short term and in the long term than maybe most people realize from the outside.
I don't think they're going to do nothing. I think at least one of those guys is going to be moved, but I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be like at the 2022 deadline where it's like, got to get CJ out of there, got to get Norm Powell out of there, got to get Robert Covington. Like, I don't think it's going to be that type of situation where they're just selling off everybody.
For sure.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that makes sense.
That
makes sense. Okay. Before we head out of here, before we say our goodbyes, internet connections be damned. Sean, anything you want to plug, anything you want to mention before we get out of here?
Yeah, just go to rosegardenreport.com. It's a Substack newsletter covering the Portland Trailblazers. I just go sign up. I would encourage you everybody has things they're doing that cost money that people, I hate to always be the, hey, you should give me money for this or that. But I think that what I do, if you're interested in reading about the Portland Trailblazers from somebody who's covered the organization for a long time and has, knows kind of the inner workings and, the people in the organization and all that kind of stuff, I feel that what I do is worth if you subscribe, you're not going to feel like, oh, I'm not getting my money's worth. This isn't worth it. So yeah. I would just encourage people to go sign up and subscribe.
I would too. I agree. Again, I think I signed up this summer at some point when it came to the Dame saga, just because I was all in.
It's always really interesting to see when. It's always really interesting to see when. That's right. Yeah. I don't know how serious the Raptors stuff was, but because I don't know how serious anything ever is with Masai, but they did talk. They were in the mix.
Fair.
But yeah, it is always interesting to see.
There's been a couple moments, man.
Yeah. They talked about OG at the 22 draft too.
Yep. There's been a couple moments between the Blazers and the Raptors where it's like, no, it's not gonna happen. So yeah. Oh man. Okay. Anyways, Sean, thank you so much for joining us here on the Objective Basketball Podcast. Always a pleasure. Great to talk to you about Blazers basketball. I'm very excited to see how it looks next year. Hopefully we get you on there beforehand, get you on here again beforehand, but very excited to see how Scoot turns out, how everybody else turns out, Shaden as well. Okay, from Lauren, from myself, thank you very much for tapping into the Objective Basketball Podcast. As always, do the rating and subscribing and things you guys usually do, and we will see you guys later. Take care.
Follow hosts at Just S. Farahini on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.